March 14, 2018. Stephen Hawking died peacefully at his home in Cambridge, England. The world mourned the loss of one of history's greatest minds. Tributes poured in from every corner of the globe. Memorials were held. His passing marked the end of an era. But what most people don't know is what Hawking left behind. Not theories, not equations, but warnings. Final messages delivered through colleagues, embedded in his last papers, hidden in his final public statements. And when you piece them together, the picture they form is absolutely terrifying. Because Stephen Hawking didn't just predict the future. He saw specific threats so dangerous that he spent his final years trying to warn us, and we ignored almost every single one. If you watch stories like this, you need to subscribe right now because what I'm about to show you goes deeper than any headline ever captured. This isn't about a scientist's legacy. It's about the countdown he started before he died, and we're already running out of time. Let's start with the message that got buried under all the tributes and obituaries. In the months before his death, Hawking grew increasingly agitated about artificial intelligence. Not in the abstract way futurists worry about robots, something sharper, more immediate. During a 2017 conference, colleagues noticed Hawking revising a presentation at the last minute, adding sections that weren't in the original draft. When he delivered it, the room went quiet. He said artificial intelligence could be the worst event in the history of our civilization unless we learn how to avoid the risks. But here's what didn't make the news. After that conference, Hawking called a private meeting with 3 researchers. No cameras, no recordings. One of those researchers later described the meeting to a technology ethics journal under condition of anonymity. According to this source, Hawking didn't just express concern, he outlined a specific timeline. He believed we had less than 30 years before AI systems would reach a threshold where human control becomes functionally impossible, not because the AI would rebel, but because it would become so integrated into every system, every decision, every infrastructure that shutting it down would collapse civilization faster than letting it run. He called it the dependency trap. We build AI to solve our problems, it works. We build more, it works better. Eventually, we can't function without it. In the moment we realize it's making decisions we don't understand, it's already too late to step back without catastrophic consequences. 2017 plus 30 years puts us at 2047. But Hawking told those researchers he thought the critical threshold, the point of no return, would come much sooner. By 2035, maybe earlier, we're already halfway there, and every major tech company is accelerating, not slowing down. Now here's where it gets darker. Hawking didn't just worry about AI autonomy, he worried about who controls it during the transition. In his final book, Brief Answers to the Big Questions, published after his death, there's a passage that most reviewers glossed over. He wrote that AI could become a tool for the concentration of power unlike anything in human history. Imagine a government or corporation with an AI that can predict human behavior, manipulate information flow, and optimize control mechanisms faster than any human resistance can organize. It's not science fiction. It's the logical endpoint of current trends. Hawking saw it coming. In private conversations during his last year, he told close colleagues he believed we were already past the point where regulation could work. The technology was moving faster than governance structures could adapt. Any country that paused development would simply fall behind others that didn't. A race with no finish line and no brakes. He called it the civilizational prisoner's dilemma. Everyone knows the outcome is dangerous, but no one can afford to stop. One colleague recalled Hawking saying something chilling during a late-night discussion in early 2018, just weeks before he died. He said, "We've built the gun, loaded it, and now we're arguing about safety training while pointing it at our own head. Someone's going to pull the trigger. The only question is whether it's on purpose or by accident." But AI wasn't Hawking's only warning. It wasn't even the one that frightened him most. That distinction belongs to something he talked about less publicly but more urgently: climate change and ecosystem collapse. Now, climate warnings aren't new. Scientists have been sounding alarms for decades, but Hawking's perspective was different. He wasn't worried about gradual warming or rising sea levels in isolation. He was terrified of runaway feedback loops, planetary systems that once triggered cannot be stopped by anything humans might attempt. He pointed specifically to Venus, a planet almost identical to Earth in size and composition. But Venus experienced a runaway greenhouse effect. Its atmosphere is now hot enough to melt lead. The surface temperature is over 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Hawking warned that Earth has the same vulnerabilities. We think of climate change as something we can reverse if we act in time. But Hawking believed there's a threshold, a tipping point, beyond which the planet's regulatory systems break down and start amplifying warming on their own. Methane release from thawing permafrost, loss of ice that reflects sunlight, ocean current disruption. Each one triggers others, and once the cascade begins, it doesn't matter what humans do. The planet shifts into a new equilibrium, one that's uninhabitable for most complex life. In a 2017 interview, Hawking said we are close to the tipping point where global warming becomes irreversible. Trump's action could push the Earth over the brink to become like Venus with a temperature of 250 degrees and raining sulfuric acid. Most people dismissed this as hyperbole, but Hawking wasn't exaggerating for effect. He'd spent years studying planetary physics. He understood feedback systems, and in private, he told colleagues he thought we'd already triggered some of the early cascades. We just hadn't felt the full consequences yet. One researcher who worked with Hawking on climate modeling said he received an email from Hawking in late 2017. The subject line read simply, "The math doesn't look good." In the email, Hawking shared preliminary models suggesting that even with aggressive carbon reduction, certain feedback mechanisms were already in motion. The email ended with a line the researcher said he'll never forget: "We may have already lit the fuse, we just haven't heard the explosion yet." That email was never made public. The researcher kept it private out of respect for Hawking's family. But he shared its existence with a scientific ethics panel in 2020, arguing that Hawking's warnings were being systematically underreported. And here's the kicker: Hawking wasn't pessimistic by nature. He spent his entire career pushing against limits, finding hope in equations, believing human ingenuity could solve nearly anything. But on climate, his tone in those final years shifted. Colleagues described him as resigned, not to inaction, but to the likelihood that humanity wouldn't move fast enough. One friend recalled a conversation in 2016 where Hawking said, "I've spent my life studying the universe. I've seen how systems behave near critical thresholds, and I'm watching my own species ignore every warning sign as we accelerate toward one." It was the only time this friend ever heard defeat in Hawking's voice. Then there's the warning hardly anyone talks about, the one Hawking embedded in his final scientific paper published 2 weeks before he died. The paper was about the multiverse, theoretical physics, equations about the nature of reality. Dry academic, exactly what you'd expect from a physicist. But colleagues who understood the deeper implications said Hawking was sending a message. The paper explored smooth exit from eternal inflation, a concept related to how universes form and end. On the surface, it's about cosmology, but Hawking included a section that essentially argued our universe might be far more fragile than we assume, that the conditions allowing for stable matter, stable stars, stable life are incredibly rare and delicately balanced. One physicist who reviewed the paper said Hawking was subtly making a point. We live in a universe that happened to have the right properties for complexity to emerge, but those properties aren't guaranteed to stay stable. And if intelligent life in that universe starts manipulating fundamental forces, energy states, quantum fields, we could destabilize the very structure that allows us to exist. He was talking about things like high-energy particle collisions, quantum computing at extreme scales, experiments that probe the fabric of reality itself. Hawking worried we might accidentally trigger a vacuum decay event, where space itself shifts into a lower energy state. If that happens, it propagates at the speed of light in all directions. Everything in its path, matter, energy, structure ceases to exist, not destroyed, just erased, returned to a simpler, lower energy configuration, and we'd never see it coming. The wave of annihilation moves at light speed. By the time you could detect it, it's already here. Now most physicists consider this risk extremely low, but Hawking wasn't saying it's imminent. He was saying we don't actually know how low the risk is because we don't fully understand the systems we're experimenting with. In his final years, Hawking repeatedly emphasized a theme: humanity's technological power is advancing faster than our wisdom. We can build things, manipulate things, unleash forces without fully understanding the consequences. And the gap between our power and our wisdom is widening. One colleague recalled Hawking comparing humanity to a child playing with a loaded gun. The child doesn't understand what the gun does. It just knows pulling the trigger makes a loud noise. We're pulling triggers on planetary systems, genetic codes, artificial intelligence, quantum fields, and we're calling it progress. Hawking called it recklessness, and he believed time was running out to close that gap. But perhaps Hawking's most urgent message wasn't about any single threat. It was about the bigger pattern, the intersection of all these risks happening at once. He called it the bottleneck. In conversations during his final year, Hawking described the next 100 years as the most dangerous period in human history. Not because any one threat will definitely destroy us, but because we're facing multiple existential risks simultaneously for the first time. AI development, climate feedback loops, nuclear proliferation, bioengineering, resource depletion. Each one alone is manageable, maybe, but together they create cascading failure scenarios where one crisis triggers others. Hawking told colleagues he believed humanity is passing through an evolutionary bottleneck. Either we develop the wisdom and cooperation to navigate these overlapping threats, or we don't make it through. There's no middle ground, and the window is closing faster than most people realize. In a 2016 lecture, Hawking said, "I don't think we will survive another 1,000 years without escaping beyond our fragile planet." 1,000 years sounds like a long time, but think about what he's actually saying. In the span of all human history, 1,000 years is nothing. And Hawking, a man who thought in terms of billions of years, cosmic timescales, was saying our species might not last one more millennium on Earth unless we fundamentally change course. Later, he revised that estimate. In 2017, he said we might not have 1,000 years, we might have 100. By his final interviews, colleagues say he privately thought even 100 years might be optimistic if we don't act immediately. He never said that publicly. He didn't want to spread despair, but people close to him knew. Hawking spent his last years watching the clock and wondering if anyone else could hear it ticking. And then there's the solution Hawking pushed harder than anything else in his final years: space colonization, not as science fiction, not as a distant dream, but as an urgent necessity. He became almost obsessive about it. In 2017, Hawking gave a speech where he said, "We're running out of space and the only places to go to are other worlds. It is time to explore other solar systems. Spreading out may be the only thing that saves us from ourselves." At first glance, it sounds like typical futurist optimism, but Hawking wasn't being optimistic. He was being pragmatic. He believed Earth was becoming uninhabitable, not centuries from now, but within the lifetime of people already born. And if humanity doesn't establish self-sufficient colonies on other worlds before Earth systems collapse, we go extinct, all of us. Every human mind, every piece of culture, every work of art, every scientific discovery, gone. He talked about it like a backup drive for civilization. If you care about your data, you don't keep it in one place, you make copies. Right now, humanity has no backup. We're one planetary catastrophe away from total extinction. Hawking wanted us to change that while we still could. But he also knew the obstacles. Space colonization is expensive, dangerous, and requires international cooperation on a scale humanity has never achieved. And we're trying to do it while simultaneously managing AI risks, climate collapse, political instability, and resource wars. In private, Hawking admitted he wasn't sure we'd pull it off. One colleague recalled a conversation in late 2017 where Hawking said, "I've spent my career believing in human potential. I still do, but belief isn't enough anymore. We need action, and I don't see it happening fast enough." Now here's the part that should terrify you. Hawking delivered all these warnings, he laid out the risks, he proposed solutions, and the world barely listened. After he died, we had a week of tributes, documentaries were made, quotes were shared, then everyone moved on. The AI industry accelerated, climate negotiations stalled, space programs remained underfunded. Every trend Hawking warned about continued, most of them faster than before. It's as if we heard one of the smartest humans to ever live say, "We're heading toward catastrophe," and we collectively shrugged. But maybe that's the real message. Hawking's final warning wasn't just about AI or climate or existential risk, it was about us, our inability to act on long-term threats, our tendency to prioritize short-term comfort over survival, our refusal to change course even when the danger is obvious. In his final book, Hawking wrote, "We are in danger of destroying ourselves by our greed and stupidity. We cannot remain looking inwards at ourselves on a small and increasingly polluted and overcrowded planet." He wasn't describing a possible future. He was describing what's already happening, and his warnings were a last-ditch effort to wake us up before it's too late. One more thing, in the weeks after Hawking's death, several colleagues reported something strange. They each received emails, letters, or messages containing fragments of Hawking's thoughts that hadn't been published. Small notes, unfinished equations, voice recordings. One researcher received a file labeled Final Thoughts dated March 10, 2018, 4 days before Hawking died. It contained a single paragraph, no equations, no references, just words. The researcher shared it at a private memorial but never published it. Until now, it's been passed quietly among a small circle of physicists. Here's what it said: "I have spent my life exploring the universe, trying to understand its origins and its fate. But in the end, the question that haunts me is not whether the universe will end. It is whether we will be here to see it. We stand at a threshold. Behind us, millions of years of evolution. Ahead, possibilities beyond imagination. But the door is closing, and if we do not walk through it now together with wisdom and courage, it will close forever. I will not live to see what choice we make. But I hope more than I have ever hoped for anything that you choose survival, not just for yourselves but for all the minds that could come after, all the discoveries yet to be made, all the beauty yet to be seen. Do not let fear or greed or ignorance erase that future. You are the universe becoming aware of itself. Do not let that light go out." Stephen Hawking died believing humanity's survival was uncertain. He spent his final years trying to shift the odds in our favor, and now the question is whether we'll prove him right or wrong. The threats he warned about are real. AI is advancing faster than regulation. Climate feedback loops are accelerating. We're still confined to one fragile planet, and the clock he heard ticking in his final days hasn't stopped. If anything, it's louder now. So what do? The same thing Hawking did. We pay attention, we act, we push for the solutions he spent his last breath advocating for: responsible AI development, aggressive climate action, space exploration, international cooperation, and most importantly, we close the gap between our power and our wisdom before that gap closes us. Because here's the truth Hawking understood better than almost anyone: the universe doesn't care if we survive, it won't mourn us if we're gone. The only thing standing between humanity and extinction is us, our choices, our willingness to face hard truths and make sacrifices for a future we won't live to see. Hawking gave us the roadmap. He showed us the dangers and the doors, now it's up to us to walk through them. Before Stephen Hawking died, he sent one final message, not in a single speech or paper but woven through everything he said and did in those last years. The message was simple: we are running out of time, the threats are real. The solutions exist, but only if we act now. He's gone, the warnings remain, and the clock is still ticking. The question we face now isn't whether Hawking was right. Evidence continues to mount that he was. The question is whether we'll respond like the species he believed we could be, or whether we'll become a cautionary tale told to whatever comes after us. Consider what's happened since his death. Artificial intelligence has evolved at a pace that's exceeded even the most aggressive predictions. Large language models, deep learning systems, neural networks operating at scales that would have seemed impossible just 5 years ago. We're now at a point where AI systems can write code, conduct research, make medical diagnoses, and influence global markets. And we still don't fully understand how they work. The transparency problem Hawking warned about hasn't improved, it's gotten worse. We've built systems we can't fully explain, integrated them into critical infrastructure, and we're only beginning to ask what happens if they fail. The dependency trap he described is already forming around us. Hospitals can't function without automated systems. Financial markets run on algorithmic trading. Power grids are optimized by machine learning. We've outsourced our decision-making to tools we don't completely understand, and pulling the plug would cause more immediate damage than letting them run. We're exactly where Hawking said we'd be, and we got here faster than he predicted. On climate, the situation has become even more dire. The feedback loops he warned about aren't theoretical anymore. They're measurable. Permafrost is thawing, releasing methane at accelerating rates. Polar ice is retreating, reducing the sun's reflection. Ocean currents are slowing. We've crossed what many scientists now call tipping points, thresholds beyond which the warming becomes self-sustaining regardless of human action. The latest climate models, the ones using actual measured data from the last 5 years, suggest we may have already triggered irreversible changes. Some researchers argue we're past the point of mitigation. We're now in the era of adaptation and survival. That's not alarmism. That's mainstream climate science. And Hawking saw it coming with a clarity that most of us are only now beginning to grasp. The email he sent about the math not looking good. That researcher eventually did speak publicly about it, in limited form, during a conference on climate ethics in 2022. He confirmed that Hawking's models suggested we were already past several critical thresholds. The full data was never released, kept in archives pending permissions from Hawking's estate, but the implication was clear. Hawking knew, and he believed we'd passed the point of prevention. What remains now is the question of how many of us survive what comes next. But here's what troubles me most about Hawking's warnings. It's not that they were wrong, it's that they haven't changed anything. We treat his final messages like we treat most dire warnings from scientists. We acknowledge them. We feel a brief moment of concern. Then we return to normalcy because the threat feels abstract, distant, too large to process. We can't imagine our entire civilization failing, so we don't. We can't envision a world where AI escapes our control, so we assume it won't. We can't accept that we might be living in the final centuries of human dominance on Earth, so we convince ourselves that innovation will save us at the last moment. But Hawking wasn't offering false hope. He wasn't suggesting that someone somewhere would develop a miraculous solution in time. He was saying that we have the tools now, we have the knowledge now, we have the capability to change course, we just lack the will. And will, he believed, might not materialize until it's too late. That's the real terror in his warnings, not that the threats are unstoppable, but that we're choosing not to stop them. We're choosing short-term comfort over long-term survival. We're choosing the profit available today over the possibility of tomorrow. And we're doing it while one of the greatest minds in human history was literally begging us to stop. In those final conversations colleagues had with Hawking, there's a thread that runs through nearly all of them, a kind of exhausted determination. Hawking knew he was dying, his ALS was progressing, his body was shutting down, and yet he spent what little time remained trying to warn us, not because he expected we'd listen. The evidence suggests he didn't, but because he had to try. Because the alternative was silence, and silence in the face of extinction would have been a betrayal. One colleague described sitting with Hawking in his office in early 2018. Hawking could barely move at that point. Communication took hours, but he kept working, kept refining his message, kept trying to find the words that would finally penetrate our collective denial. The colleague asked him why he was doing this, spending his last energy on warnings that society seemed determined to ignore. Hawking's response, painstakingly spelled out through his speech synthesizer, was something like this. Because my voice still works, because people still listen, and because if I don't say it, someone else might not either, and the world needs to hear this. That's the weight of Hawking's final message. He wasn't claiming certainty about the future, he was offering what he could give us, his analysis, his concern, his desperate hope that we'd prove him wrong by actually changing. He wanted to be wrong, he wanted to predict catastrophe and have humanity surprise him by rising to the occasion. But everything he saw in those last years suggested we wouldn't. We'd continue accelerating toward the danger while telling ourselves it would all work out. And somewhere between now and the threshold he identified, we discover that we'd waited too long. We'd crossed the point where course correction is possible. We'd find ourselves locked into a future we can no longer change, and we'd have to live with the knowledge that we saw it coming, that Hawking told us, that we heard him and decided it was someone else's problem, some future generation's burden. But here's the thing about Hawking's warnings: they're not passive. They're not meant to inspire despair or resignation. They're meant to inspire action. He laid out the problems precisely because he believed we could solve them if we chose to. The solutions exist. Space exploration is technically possible. We have the engineering knowledge to establish self-sustaining colonies. Responsible AI development is achievable. We know how to build safer systems. We're just choosing not to. Climate action is feasible. We could transition to renewable energy. We could restructure our economic systems. We could save the ecosystems that remain. We're just choosing not to. That's the final message. Not that we're doomed, but that we're choosing doom, and only we can choose differently. So what now? What do we do with Hawking's warnings in a world that seems determined to ignore them? We start small. We start local. We start with the people around us. We begin conversations about AI and climate in our future. We educate ourselves about the actual science, not the sensationalized versions or the denialist versions, but the real data. We push for change within our spheres of influence. We vote for leaders who take these warnings seriously. We support research and development in the areas Hawking highlighted. And we really accept that our individual actions matter. Hawking spent his life studying systems too large to comprehend, stars and black holes in the structure of spacetime, and yet he believed that individual human choices multiplied across billions of people could alter the trajectory of civilization. That's not naive optimism. That's physics. That's how complex systems work. Small changes in initial conditions can cascade into massive differences in outcomes. It's called sensitivity to initial conditions. It's why weather forecasters can't predict beyond 2 weeks. It's why historians argue endlessly about which small decisions change the course of empires. We are that. We are the small decisions that will determine whether humanity survives this bottleneck or doesn't. Hawking's last message to us, the one assembled from fragments and final conversations and the words he left behind, comes down to this. You have the power, the knowledge exists, the tools are available. What's required now is the will to use them. And that will comes from you, from all of us, from the countless individual decisions to act differently, to demand differently, to think differently about our future. He gave us the roadmap. He identified the threats. He proposed the solutions. He spent his final breath trying to wake us up. The rest is on us. Because Stephen Hawking understood something profound that most of us are still struggling to grasp. We are not passengers in this story. We are the authors. The future isn't something that happens to us. It's something we create through the choices we make, starting now, today, this moment.